Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. I'm so excited that you guys are joining us. We are now back for season 4. We've recorded over 110 episodes. I cannot believe that. And we're in over 70 countries listening to the podcast. Today, I want to welcome Liberia to the list of the 70 plus countries listening from around the world. Well, today, my guest is Andrew Cohen. Since 1997, Andrew has been the CEO and managing partner of Evoke. It's an award-winning digital transformation company, and it partners with their clients to really build out modern workplace solutions in nearly every common area you can think about in an organization. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. And in 2019, Andrew launched Evoke Engage division, which focuses on automation and streamlining processes. He joined Netsurit at the beginning in 2022, and now it allows them to provide their clients with guidance and solutions using technology to maximize their ROI. Welcome to the podcast, Andrew.
Thanks, Natalie. I appreciate you having me. That was a great intro. So thanks so much.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this. In 2019, Sure. You launched a division of your company called Evoke Engage. I want to learn a little bit about what your goal was when you were launching that and what inspired you to create that.
No, that's a great question. It was very timely. I was looking at how obviously the pandemic was starting to creep around. We were looking at ways to help companies maximize their technology investment, really leverage what their spend is, and heavily into the Microsoft stack. So we came up with a solution that really worked really well with our core offering, which was, just traditional professional services, how we work with companies, project type of work. But I'm always looking for the ways that would kind of maybe move the needle or give out companies better usage of what they're currently spending. So I worked with a team. We came up with Evoke Engage, and it was a way to look at, can we leverage their technology investment, help companies do more with what they're already spending money on, and then help them streamline processes with automation, and then other kind of solutions that live within that kind of technology stack. So it proved really successful. It helped to really elevate these modern experiences we were creating on like more traditional methods previously, and then really stitched all these kind of sites into what we call these single site experiences. So yeah, that's what Evoke Engage was for, and kind of has evolved now into what my new role is at Netsurit.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because I think that automation is obviously part of what helps companies stay competitive. When we think about automation, it's the idea that when we grow 10%, 20%, we don't have to add 10% or 20% of staff. It's the idea that we can scale without having to add more staff as we get more customers. So talk a little bit about how you guys have looked at this and also how you've helped companies think about this.
Right. And it's, when we're talking about our innovation offering, is like innovation as a service. It's more of a service type of offering that's an ongoing way we do our work together, our clients. And we look at the classification, companies like you mentioned quickly about companies that want to scale, and they need to innovate to scale, but they're not kind of we call them like the jackrabbits kind of mode, where they're just doing everything. They're buying every type of SaaS product out there, trying to see how it's all going to bolt together. And what they really have is this kind of scrambled mess of solutions that don't communicate really effectively with each other. So when we come in and engage with a company, we try to understand that whole environment, what's there, and then what lives, what gets depreciated based on what can be leveraged from some of the other technology investment. So automation is not just automation just for automation's sake. It has to be meaningful, and it has to connect these systems together to bring those kind of real-time insights and outcomes for these companies as they start driving their business decisions going forward. This is both for internal operational effectiveness as well as customer experience effectiveness as well. And that's where we live. So we look at that. We try to create these jackrabbits, move them along the chain so they start growing and scaling and innovating along the way. And then we call the juggernauts when they hit that for a prime level. And we like it. We look at SMBs all the way to enterprise clients. So it's a complete opposite on the enterprise space.
Yeah.
What works in the SMB space. So
no, you're right. I'm just seeing those two like kind of very different organizations. Yes. And so you talked about kind of the hockey stick where the growth is just insanity. I've sat in some of those organizations. It's fun and it's also terrifying, right? You feel like you're falling off the train, trying not to fall off. Talk a little bit about—
I was guilty of that too. I'll just say this, Natalie. When we were as Evoke, we were one of those jackrabbits until I started really Evoke Engage kind of help us settle and understand what we were trying to do. So if we could be our best patient for ourselves, figure out ways to be efficient and process improvement and automate where needed and just kind of create better unified experiences for the company, we were able to accelerate our growth a lot quicker. So yeah, we practiced our own medicine before we became part of Netsurit as well.
I love that. So talk a little bit, I would love to compare and contrast. So when you're
Yeah.
thinking about these high growth engines, like you said, they're just flying, just
Mhm.
grabbing stuff, not necessarily, none of it's talking to each other, and maybe not
Mhm.
even buying things that actually fit their ecosystem, but they've heard right through the grapevine they should
Yeah,
buy
of course.
this. How's your approach a little different than when you're working with these large enterprises that are a little bit, like, they can be slower moving and maybe a
Yeah.
little bit more, it's harder for them to kind of turn the ship, if you will?
Yeah, and it's a completely different dynamic when you're talking to an enterprise client. So we go into the areas that really focuses heavy on operational effectiveness kind of issues because they have all these systems in their place. You're not going to replace like the SAPs of the world. We're not trying to do that, but we want to connect to those systems. So when we look at a solution that works in the enterprise space, we try to understand that whole ecosystem, what the business problem is, what is the technology that exists that supports the current line of business, and then how can we automate other areas to help them make accelerated decisions. So for example, we did a project recently for one of our big pharma clients that changed the process they had currently in place was taking 48 hours plus to get a communication back to the field. Has been mitigated down to 3 minutes. And it's real-time information, not just a response, but also the data behind it is supported. So the metrics are supported to the actual real actionable insights to the line of sale.
I love
Mhm.
that. So take that and
Mhm.
that's your large one. So in a smaller environment, you're
Yeah.
really looking at how do we get let's see what you have.
Yeah.
Let's get
Mhm.
these things talking to each other, and then let's kind of maybe even rationalize,
Yeah.
do you really need all this? Because I think in
Mhm.
smaller but fast growing environments, sometimes they're buying things that they don't need or things that maybe are just not a right fit for where they're at growth wise in their organization.
Yeah, and again, I think we're seeing that with a lot of the engagements we have now for the smaller organizations, nonprofits, or small companies that are growing. And they might be under 100 employees, or 100 to 200 employees, or even 50. So you see a lot of these satellite applications out there, and some do really fit well into their business need. It's not like saying we're going to come in and say you should wipe out these 5, or there's redundancy. If there is redundancy, we're going to make recommendations and say maybe instead of using this solution, let's leverage your other investment you have with Microsoft Stack and see if we can have a one-to-one match or build a solution that's going to be a low-code potential bolt on to their area and then get rid of another application. So the goal is, can you minimize your application stack so create less cost as well as less churn and all these kind of things that aren't communicating. If all those technologies need to stay in place, all those systems, we figure the best ways we want to pull the information, the data in a real-time aspect, which they're not doing currently for a lot of these organizations. So they're going from application to application. They're not communicating. So when they get to effective meetings or even stuff for their customers, they're seeing real-time information because we've connected all those streams together.
Wow, this is very impactful. I even just think about the number of organizations where they're not talking across. And so sometimes
Yeah.
they're using the same thing, but they're using it in 3 different ways
Sure.
versus
Yeah.
all coming together and having an enterprise account to use it. You'd
Yeah.
be surprised. Well, you wouldn't be surprised how much that happens.
Well, you are surprised as you go into these engagements. You find out they're maybe using 20% of an application, and that's all they really needed from it. So can you replicate that some other way, or just keep that? And then it's a high cost. And as they start adding other additional users, the users are maybe there's low engagement and low adoption of these systems. So we're trying to figure out how do we not only build solutions that are going to add that value, connect these things together, but have high user adoption as well. So it's really important because that's the only way you're going to scale if everyone's kind of walking together with these kind of that roadmap to success.
So in your experience, what would you say have been maybe some of the top just challenges people face when going through the implementation of automation?
On the small scale and smaller clients, I don't mean to say small scale, but the smaller businesses are trying to scale. There's a real, you know, there's excitement for these things, but there's no real strategy in place. There's no real roadmap, and there's no way to identify what currently is broken so easily because they're just doing their daily job. It's kind of running all together and maybe not all together, running in different directions, and they're just wearing many hats. So we look at these things. Can you get a unified kind of a strategy together? And we look at digital transformation as what we call perpetual agility, perpetual innovation. So it's not just the final destination point, it's ongoing. So we chart a plan with these kind of companies of where they want to be, where they are now, where they're trying to get to, and then the kind of systems and prioritize what the processes in place that are really manual or slow and repetitive. Can we start looking at those and start knocking those off on the highest ones that have the biggest impact on the business? So once we start creating that acceleration in terms of better process improvement, get that operational effectiveness piece done, then they can start turning their view to the client side as well. how do they engage with their customer experiences? And can you automate some of that kind of transactional information as well? So it's really a guided process. We become not like just digital Sherpa, we're actually doing the implementation, but we're also giving that strategy and guidelines along the way. And then we're always tracking the effectiveness of these solutions. Are they hitting the mark? And if they're not, we have to keep working until we get it right.
Okay, so random aside.
Yeah.
What is your background in? So like, how did you get into this? What is your
I'm
background?
not a
Like,
tech,
yeah.
okay, here's my background. Let's see. I'm from the South, North Carolina. I played soccer in college, and I was a fine art major at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So shout out to the Tar Heels. And I think I always liked computers and technology, but I was, just, I guess, more athletic in nature. So when I stopped playing sports, I tried to figure out a pathway for myself. So when I moved to New York, I started getting involved in tech, more of graphic design and animation and things like that. There was no real internet at the time. I'm not going to age myself, but this is back in the 90s, early 90s when I moved to New York. And, as I kind of like started thinking about these things, like being more entrepreneurial in spirit, so I evolved from that quickly to want to do my own business. I didn't want to work for big agencies. I didn't want to work as a designer or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't my career path. And as I started getting more and more spread in my skill set and finding people to work with, I started adding in capabilities. So we moved from just visual animation, television graphics to website development. And then I was able to bring people in that could help support that. And I just was more on the vision side of that, understanding the strategy, what we're trying to achieve, and seeing that other things were going to be, depreciated, like television graphics, because it was all being brought in-house. We moved into animation for websites. And then we got fortunate to get into the enterprise space. We had a couple of big wins with clients just because of our web experience. They said, hey, can you help us with our intranet sites? And that's where we started learning about the whole Microsoft enterprise space, like the SharePoints of the world and things like that. So it was a really strange evolution, how I got from there to here. I didn't ever would have predicted it, that I'd be doing what I do now. And now it's so much focused on just technology, but also the strategy and the user experience and user engagement model as well. So circuitous path, I guess. Not a straight line, to say the least.
So. That's awesome. Well, and even just the idea that, so much of, I think, when I listen to your background, so much of entrepreneurship and innovation is just building blocks. It's literally testing and trying new things. And as you do that, you start to kind of build this momentum, and you start to find these pockets or these veins where there's a need. And then you have the savvy, right? The business savvy to be able to strategically figure out how to meet that need. And then as a serial entrepreneur, do it again and again and again.
Yeah, we're iterating all the time. And that's what I think is really successful about how we're building this innovation piece for our business. It was Evoke Engage. It's now called Innovation Service within my new organization I work with. And we were constantly refining it and seeing how we can add in more value. So it's really about just adding additional things that we can do. Some things take a little longer to get developed and implemented. So what in parallel we're doing, how do we help companies understand more of what they're using, better understanding of the technology they have? Because if they're using 15 to 20% of their technology, can we elevate that? Can we show them how we can get better communication, better collaboration? These kind of things that you can do with no technology, just consultative, out of the box, as we call it, kind of ways just to utilize what you have as we're rolling out these solutions that are low code or even pro code type of solutions as well.
Yeah. As you talk about innovation, I feel like a lot of what stops innovation or kills innovation is this inability to scale. And so because they don't have the right foundation in place at times, it's so difficult sometimes to get things like into the organization, get them through the organization. And so by creating the right foundations, you can then build on top of that, and you can move quickly, you can scale quickly. And so I think a lot of what you're leaning into is through creating this foundation, you're actually fostering innovation through just better productivity as well.
Right. And foundation, we call it like the digital framework. So when we come into an engagement, we do a digital maturity assessment of what the company currently is at. And that's sort of the foundational part. So what the rest of Netsurit's really strong at is the foundational work, getting companies from the old on-premise servers to the cloud, or help them stand up their cybersecurity, really locking down that things that happen. Then there's the second two kind of tiers, we call them the channels, is the operational effectiveness, and as well as the customer experience effectiveness. So that's where we live. Our innovation team, what we do when we speak with all these companies you just kind of mentioned, in terms of they can't scale, they can't, because they don't really have the capacity. They might have capability, they might have a couple of talented people in house, but they're busy with day jobs. So we come in and just team up with them, help them, guide them, deliver these solutions. They work as a team, as our innovation team, to help accelerate that growth and accelerate that innovation opportunities. And it falls into, once they're kind of in that cloud, in that environment, then they're really something that we can work with really well.
Mhm. I love that because this is really leaning into, I think, the crux of where a lot of organizations struggle is around this. This almost becomes kind of the tension point of growth.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times, you can't go out and solve the problem by hiring 10 more people. You have to figure out how to deliver more efficiently. You have to figure out how to kind of collapse some of the processes and procedures that you're doing. I mean, this is to me, like, I want to stay here for a second because I
Right.
think that a lot of people feel that, well, if I had 10 more people, I could, and then they insert whatever that thing is they think they can
Exactly.
do.
True, true.
Yeah.
It's funny. I have a presentation I give, and part of it talks about the Mikitani rule. It sounds like you've read that book or by Mikitani. But what works at 3 breaks at 10. It's just this kind of theory that you start adding bodies, it doesn't make things work more efficiently.
Mhm.
So there's ways to just kind of mitigate that by by adding the solution is going to compound the problem. And so really is the thing. So it's really that kind of same mindset. So like just putting more people on one effort doesn't make it develop faster. This is the things we look at. So we try to understand what the current team is trying to do, and do adding 10 bodies to their IT department, is that going to create the efficiencies? It typically doesn't. So it's more like, well, better to hire those people towards some other areas of the business and look at the company in terms of what they're doing now. And a lot of times when they have current internal staff, they might be doing manual repetitive things, spending 100 hours a month doing just data entry. Can we
Mhm.
take that person, elevate their experience, create a better user experience, employee engagement experience for that person, and have them do something better for the business, add more value, and maybe they get new clients because they can add additional bandwidth. So this is the kind of things we look at, and this high engagement. I'll understand what they're doing and how they're challenged, and how we can help support that and bring in some kind of, whether it's automation or solutions or technology or better collaboration to get them to where they want to be.
What would you say are, like, if someone's listening to this and they're saying, "Man, yeah, need to do it. This is hitting the vein of what I'm dealing with." What would you say are, like, as you look around your organization, the top 3 things that you guys personally find that immediately are things that you go after automation for?
Yeah, that's such a good question because it comes up. We build like these theme matrix. We have like a top 10 list that you just see like that could probably be inserted in most engagements when we talk to a company. Probably the one that seems to be lifting the most frequently is data. I mean, the data systems that are all in disparate systems, they're not communicating together, and they want to visualize it and have meaningful dashboards. That becomes one just primary objective. Can we get our data connected? Can we also be operating from the same single site experience? Is everyone seeing the same data and the most efficient information? So that automation of stitching that together is a big one. Collaboration. People have SharePoint, internally as internet, and they hate it. This is one of our things. This is our foundation. We were experts at that for many years, helping companies to better build a better modern experience, a better workplace. Just when they turn on their screens, they know all the information about the business is brought to them real time. They can see the things that are valuable to them to see and do their jobs more efficiently. And that's really not really, it's just turning on things and configuring at that point. And then some of the other ones we look at, there's all these things with like processes of AR processing, accounts receivable, accounts payable, just these things that are traditionally a lot of manual efforts. And now they look at ways, can we create workflows that automate that process? So we're always looking at that. There's another one, just HR onboarding is a big one too. And we have one company, they're a large organization, and they have a team of 8 that all can work on the same onboarding process, but only can work at 1 hour at a time because they use a shared spreadsheet and they don't want to overwrite each other. And so
Whoa.
yeah, it's crazy. And you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of employees that they're trying to be onboarded or hired, and they have to get this whole process through a massive Excel that just has a time constraint. So by bringing that into what we call a Power App, you can eliminate the Excel world, and they can all work simultaneously and streamline that process from 3 weeks to bring on a new employee to a week. And that's just things that you start looking at. And what does that mean to the business? Because that's a big thing for us. What's the return on innovation, return on value to them?
Mhm.
That person might be in sales. So they're out there doing business and doing sales for the organization. So that it does tie to the bottom line.
Do you guys calculate this? I know I've been at organizations where we've gone through and calculated the number of hours that someone has spent on a task and then
Yeah.
come back and said, okay, now that there's automation here, it went from, 30 hours a month down to 3 hours a month, and therefore
Mhm.
our savings is X. Do you
Yes.
kind of do that back end math as well?
We try to do that up front. So when we engage, and especially in the innovation service, it's important because we have what we call the ROI guarantee. So it sounds a little kind of cliche or whatever. We actually do guarantee these things. So when we do a solution, we want to benchmark it in terms of if it doesn't hit the metric that we identify for success, then we have to keep working for a period of time till it gets it right on us. So every engagement needs to be well defined. So when we do this initial, how we engage in terms of the kind of user journey with a new customer, we do a free like ideation workshop together, because I want to chart out there's maybe 5 to 10 things that are really pressing. Like you said, would exist across all organizations. Some are unique depending on the industry, because the manufacturing industry might have a much different need than a hair salon that has 20 facilities. So we look at things completely unique per place. And then if we can define the opportunities and solutions, prioritize with them together for the feasibility and what can be done the most pressing, we can quickly map out an ROI statement for that, and then have buy-in from the client, because it does speak to that. It's not just every hour is equal savings, so you look at things of what the value is to the business. So we create that metric, that ROI calculation together. We sign off on it together and we start delivering. And then once that solution's rolling out, we start showing how it's saving them that money over that course of that 12-month cycle. And then that's the thing, it has to be skin in the game for us, and also the client has to accept that this is what we're also charting for effectiveness. And it can be multiple solutions in a year. It's just if you're saying by 1-to-1, it's how we kind of look at it.
That's really fascinating. I love the upfront guarantee versus
Yeah.
the back end. Hopefully it worked out for you.
Yeah. And it's just, that's the difference between the project mindset that we've traditionally had, that, we deliver something. Yeah, we're all happy. We do the after briefing of how this project was successful or not successful. And then we go to support, but it never really tracked why we did the project. So we're doing the why up front, and then we're measuring the effectiveness immediately as soon as it releases. And then in parallel, we're doing the next thing in that priority list. So if they're engaged on that kind of like perpetual innovation idea that I was saying about earlier, we're going to the next thing, and we're still supporting the one we delivered, and we're tracking that one we delivered. So it keeps that thing, the opportunity list going and growing, and just saving the business that we're working with a lot more money and time.
Wow. This has been awesome. This has been so incredible.
Cool.
What final
Thank
thoughts
you,
would you have for our listeners today as they think about this topic of just innovation through automation?
I guess it depends on who's listening, where they sit. Are they in that jackrabbit category, or are they just curious? There's areas that are not even the jackrabbits yet. They're still they're into technology. We have a construction company that's very old school. They're just getting away from paper now. And now all of a sudden they just took a bite of innovate, in terms of the first solution we built out, and all of a sudden the excitement, you can see it. Oh, can we do this next? Can we do this workflows next? So they start understanding, they take that evaluation of their business. It's a self-reflective things, whether they do it internally on their own or work with a company like ours to do that assessment of what they're doing and where they want to be. So they could chart that. Any company can do that. And it's the first step. And then if they want to move forward into a digital transformation, they need to have a real strategy, and then have that executive buy-in that this is what we're going to do. Here's the next 36 months looks like. And it's going to, sometimes it's a very fast accelerated growth, and some could be, a longer period depending on the organization and what needs to change. So again, it's very interesting how it's approached by each company. And we've taken the companies that are really far down the line, that are already doing everything automation, everything cool. They still bring us in because they have capacity issues. They can't do it. And they have the companies that are just still pen and paper. They're starting to move. So we look at all areas and how we engage. This all depends on what their need is.
So great. This is so fascinating. I could talk about this for hours. This is
Thank
really awesome. Tell people where they can find and follow you.
Well, yes. I think, we'll put that probably into the show link, I imagine, but you can go to the www.netsurit.com. And under there's an innovation section, for in digital transformation. That's where my face will be all over the website, unfortunately. So that's like crazy, so you'll find me, you'll see some testimonial information, more about the service. And then they can reach out and even book an ideation session with us. That's, like I said earlier, that free session is something I personally do and run that workshop. And then, if there's an opportunity to engage after that, great. And then obviously on LinkedIn, my profile will be in the show link as well.
Awesome. Well, you know what? That ideation session, after talking to you, I think it would be well worth it for someone to book that, because this is an area that you just have a wealth of knowledge in, and I can tell you deeply care about, which is so cool.
Well, thanks, Natalie. I appreciate it. And I do. So that's great. Great to hear. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.